The Red Eye Radio podcast is a service of Freightliner and Detroit.
Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. This is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He's Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley. Keep yourselves busy. We're still working here.
We're not ready. We're not ready. No, you were reading me the story.
Yeah.
You weren't ready. The beginning of the show interrupted.
I know. Our little
interrupted
thing we were having here.
Interrupted our us time.
Yeah.
And you just continue on the story. Okay. Continue where you were on this here.
Yeah.
I just thought it was...
All right. Hollywood Reporter.
Hold it. Hi, everybody. The show started.
Hi, he's Gary. I'm Eric. It's Red Eye.
All across
the
world,
blah, blah.
universe.
Blah, blah, blah.
Signal goes a long way.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was this now again?
Anyway, from Hollywood Reporter, Charlie Rose's life now. Broken, brilliant, and lonely. So it talks about it. Well, it goes on to they write. Who wrote this? James Oliver Curie at Hollywood Reporter. Anyway, how he walks into Gabriel's Bar and Restaurant, a Lincoln Center eatery that's popular among New York's media elite. Al Pacino had just left. Here comes Charlie Rose. I gotta go. Ooh, somebody get my tab. What? Who cares if Al Pacino just walked out?
Well, and right after the media elite, that's the thing I liked. After that sentence, where the media elite hang out, Al Pacino had just walked out.
Yeah. Now, more relevant, while the state Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who recently filed a civil lawsuit against Harvey Weinstein and the Weinstein Company. Okay, now we're getting closer.
Oh, yeah,
it's
okay.
relevant.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
What does Al Pacino have to do with it? Let me out of it. Hoo-ah. So they go on to talk about how it used to take forever for Charlie to get to his table because he had to shake every hand in the place. He knew everybody and he talked to everybody. Now he just holds his head down. He ate alone, and it took under an hour.
Under an hour? That's a...
And then he got up and left. Really?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to guess that maybe that experience on that day, I don't know, maybe 50 million other Americans did the exact same thing.
Look, I sometimes don't even get to sit down. I really don't. It's like the sandwich. Okay, keep going. It took him under an hour. I'm supposed to care? I'm just wondering why. Why we're supposed to care. Why that's supposed to be news. You saw there's the I couldn't believe they still print. I actually had to stand in line at a grocery store. Normally I go at 5 a.m. when there's nobody there. And I had to stand in line the other day, and they still have tabloids. I didn't know they printed tabloids anymore. I thought everybody just went online and read them. What do I know? And there was a picture of Matt Lauer on one of them. And I just thought to myself, why? I mean, if you're writing about the criminal case or something, on allegations of somebody, then that's one thing. Why do I care about a failed, by the way, so-called celebrity? These people are supposed to be celebrities. Former anchors are supposed to be celebrities. And we're supposed to care that he walks in. Al Pacino walked out before he walked in.
Well, did Al Pacino have a crowd?
Probably.
So we're supposed to feel sorry for a guy who got let go because of his own wrongdoings.
Yes.
Who then is in, I'm going to guess if it's an exotic restaurant, a restaurant that most of us probably would bypass to go to McDonald's.
Right.
Down the street. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he went in alone, wasn't greeted by the throngs, ate his meal, and left in under an hour.
Yeah. Right. That's right.
Well, then I'm extremely sad because my life is extremely pitiful.
So as I had read this earlier, and I told you about it, and I was just kind of, scratching my head, and you said, oh, you got to find that. So as I was looking for it, there was another version of it from page 6.
Oh,
and their version says, well, and his housekeeper has to go get food for him. He's 76. His housekeeper has probably always gone to get food for him. It's ridiculous. I don't know why the focus. Again, other than a criminal case, why is it news? I don't care. I didn't care before the allegations. I darn sure don't care now.
That's a good point. Everybody lives their own life. Every day is not. Hey, by the way, there's some really interesting news today. Everything is not always great.
Right. Yeah.
All right. That's number one.
Right.
I'm going to do our rundown a little bit different today. Okay. Everything in life is not great. Go ahead.
Do you know what I just thought of before I lose it? Before I lose it out of my mind, before I forget it? We were talking about the most trusted list.
Yes.
And it's always filled with celebrities?
Angelina Jolie. No,
but Charlie Rose was on that list a few years ago. Like 5 or 6 years ago. One of the lists.
Okay. All right. Yeah. He was one of the non-actors that was on that.
Now he's fallen to number 10. so not as trustworthy as he once was.
Oh man, I just
don't get it. I really don't get people's fascination with that.
Well, again, though, we go back to what you just said when we talked last year about the most trusted list, and the vast majority out of the top 10 were actors. So people who pretend is who Americans trust the most.
Yeah, we know nothing about them.
So that's where we are as a country. We don't know anything about them, but they pretend to be somebody else. I trust that guy who pretends to be something else.
Right. I mean, I have a very short list. It starts with my dad. My mom's kind of shady. She hasn't made the list yet, but she might. It's possible. But my list is pretty short. Certainly doesn't include actors. I love you, Mom.
That's going to get back.
Oh, trust me. It's Sunday morning at church. She's going to hear about that.
Somebody told me you said you didn't trust me on the air. You were kidding, right?
Exactly.
No.
Why were they discussing that in Sunday school class? What was going on there? Yeah, I don't know. I don't get the whole fascination with it.
So news item number 1 right there. Life isn't always great.
Yeah. Let's relate it to Trump because we've said this before, but I think it fits right in. For decades, everybody would have him on their show, right? You always had him on. I mean, go back and watch.
They adored him.
They did. Go back and watch the Larry King interviews. And I'm not sure Larry King necessarily adored anyone, except for Frank Sinatra, maybe. But I think if you go back to the any of the media interviews, Oprah, I mean, the guy was treated like a celebrity. Well, he runs as a Republican and wins. He's automatically the devil. All of a sudden. I mean, who sat on that the Billy Bush tape? For what, 11 years?
Yeah.
Why did they sit? Just ask yourself, why would they sit on that? Why bring it out 11 years later? I'm not saying what he said on the tape is right. I'm not saying I condone it. I'm just asking the question, if they're going to judge, because somebody had that tape, a group of somebody's actually heard that tape, and it was probably well known that the tape was out there, but they were okay with it.
And it reminds me, life isn't always great. I was reading you just portions of it. I don't have it in front of me right now, but the National Review did a story on the woman who saved the Second Amendment.
Oh yeah,
and it was the scholar.
Yeah.
If you'd pass her on the street and not even know it.
Right.
And she's the woman that they refer to as she's the one that saved the Second Amendment. She is the one that has done all, the research about the Second Amendment and what the Founding Fathers really thought about it and what they wrote and what they did. Mm-hmm. And, she just, and she came to believe and she did this research, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s. And so she had always viewed that gun ownership's an individual right. She said, look, government can't come in. And she went all the way back. She went back to Great Britain and what they experienced, way back when, and society in general when it came to modern Western society and the whole thought, behind gun ownership. And she came to understand that any government that would take away your ability to protect yourself is a tyrannical government that you have a right to. Now, she's always been a Democrat. And she viewed it, she said, look, I viewed it as history. I did the research. This is what they said. This is what they believed. This is what they wrote down on paper. It exists. She said, it's not my opinion. And she was a lifelong Democrat. When in the 90s, Schumer got a hold of her and just tore her apart. How everything she was talking about was, she said, as if I was some type of partisan. She goes, I'm not a partisan. I'm a historian.
Right.
And she said, I realized at that point that it didn't matter whether I told the truth. These people have that, and something that we've talked about, it's been a lot of the show this week about how the liberalism and the Democrats, that it's not about a conspiracy anymore. It's not, okay, did Obama tell Loretta Lynch to tell Comey to tell, whatever your conspiracy theory would be. It's the culture that exists. It's what Bernard Goldberg said about the media elite way back almost 20 years ago when he wrote the book Bias. He said, this isn't a conscious thing where they conspire to do it and they all say, we're going to slant the news. It's the culture. It's how they've been educated. And so it becomes part of their culture that the end justifies the means, that the truth doesn't matter. All that matters is their emotional what their emotional morality is, that they believe is higher than any other discussion that goes on in society. And so, and as she said, for her, she said, it just shows that you can go in to something with totally innocent intentions. I want to find out what history is. And you can become absolutely demonized as the worst person on earth. And she said, but, she's fine with it. But this gets to the whole point of you can be thinking you're doing great things and people aren't going to appreciate it. Luckily, you and I went into talk radio understanding that half the people will like me, half the people will hate me. And once you realize that, you don't care. It's no big deal. You just don't do it. It was a shock to her because she didn't go in it to be controversial. She went in it. She said, I just went in it to find out what, I'm a history major. What is the history of the Second Amendment? What was the beliefs of it? And then she said many of the things that we, that we have said, it was about a tyrannical government, but it's also about the inherent right of self-protection, irrespective of what your foe is, whether it's a tyrannical government, whether it's a wild animal, whether it's a robber. It doesn't matter. That individual right of self-protection exists, and any government that takes that away from you was the thought of the Founding Fathers and many others in the foundation of the country. When it came to, again, self-protection. So it just shows you that, hey, every day can't be great. Now, other news that we found out, James Comey apparently doesn't like the guy that fired him.
Yeah, you and I were having this discussion because it seems to be this big whirlwind. Oh, it's going to be big. It's going to be a huge, very bad weekend for the president because we're going to learn that the guy he fired doesn't like him?
Well, we'll go through it, but I told you, I said, the things that have come out, the excerpts that have come out, said he seems very childlike and immature. That if you're talking about you're in law enforcement, you're the highest levels of law enforcement, that the things that he comes out with so far in the book are very childlike and petty.
Well, here's the thing, because that's the accusation from the left, toward the president. And you can say what you will about his tweets. So if you were James Comey, wouldn't you want to come out with a book that was very straight to the point, analytical, and something that former FBI director would write?
Yeah.
To counter yourself against the president's behavior on social media?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, say what you will about the president and his tweets, and we've talked about that and the things that he's done. But we're talking about somebody who was responsible for that culture that we just touched on at the FBI. Now, if he's going to write a tell-all book, which, this basically isn't a tell-all, it's about what he thinks about the guy who fired him.
Right.
It's because he talks about his leadership. Well, hate to break it to you, Mr. Comey, but you haven't been there in quite a while. Remember, you were fired. So your assessment is just watching from afar and from the perspective of a disgruntled former government employee.
So we'll get to that and more, plus your calls and comments. Hey, it's a Friday show. If you'd like to get in, 866-90-RED-EYE.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up on the bottom of the hour, some of the things, the excerpts that are out from Comey's book. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. Also, coming up on the show, drivers using their mobile phones could be fined without ever knowing they've been caught. New technology out there that law enforcement could be using in the future, whether they will or not, will be one thing. But we'll get to that. The end of the world now, the 23rd. So, you don't want
zombie apocalypse.
Rapture is what it's, and all I'm thinking of is the Blondie song.
Yeah.
So that really bothers me that song now, ever since I saw it yesterday, the Rapture is, I'm like, that song's going through my mind. And so it is the end of the world. When that happens, it's the end of my world.
That if that song starts playing,
if that song starts going through my head, because I remember, and I hated that song. So it's like, it's pure torture.
Yeah.
Also,
not my favorite Blondie song.
No, not at all. The other interesting thing, the president now has asked advisors to study rejoining the Pacific Trade Pact.
Okay.
The Trans-Pacific Pact, Trade Pact, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And as soon as I saw that, I said, Larry Kudlow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was funny because when I went to the Wall Street Journal and read I didn't read the whole article, but I didn't see that they had mentioned Kudlow, but they just said, okay, now this is the good thing. What you do is you open trade with all the people that are willing to do trade with you. Don't start threatening tariffs with the friendlies.
Right.
You open it up across the board, and if there are people, for example, if China is not is going to continue with their trade infractions and breaking the rules, breaking trade law that they specifically agreed to, well, that's when you have friendly trade relations with everybody else.
That's exactly what Kudlow talked about on one of his last appearances on CNBC. He talked about putting on the pressure. In fact, in that conversation, now I didn't see the entire appearance on Closing Bell that day, but he never, in the clip that I saw, he never mentioned the word tariff. He never, promoted that. And he was talking about the other trade partners. You get them together and you put the pressure on China.
Yep.
So this could be a move in that direction. Here's your forecast.
Several areas of active weather around the country for the northern tier states from Idaho through Montana, North Dakota, over through portions of Michigan. We'll see some snow and icing. That'll mainly stay north of I-90. Heavy showers south of I-90. We'll get into some heavy rain today for eastern Texas over to I-55 in and around the Jackson and Memphis area, extending upwards through southern Illinois. Most of the deep south will be clear today with the exception of the Gulf Coast region and southern Florida. Lots of sunshine for the Carolinas, Tennessee, West Virginia. And a good portion of the eastern half of the country will experience a taste of spring again today. St. Louis, 74 today, but by Sunday, that temperature is going to fall to 46. For Cincinnati, 78 today. By Monday, the temperature falls to 43 for the daytime high. And there's a look at your national forecast from Red Eye Radio. I'm meteorologist John Trout.
Thanks so much, John. 866-90-RED-EYE.
The Bonus Show.
And he is Eric Hurley, and I'm Gary McNamara, 866-90 Red Eye. Normally I don't view a tweet, any tweet as being significant, but once in a while they are. Mm-hmm. Once in a while I'll see a tweet out there and I'll say, that's really good. And this one came from the former CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson, who wrote, "My take, as President Trump and some in Congress move to expose long-term alleged wide-scale misdeeds for years by some bad actors in the intelligence community, the bad actors in Intel are in a desperate scramble to keep secrets and try to get Trump first before he gets them. Who prevails? Anybody's guess."
I thought about this the other day during the whole thing with the Cohen's office being raided and all of this, and I thought to myself, it reeks of something, different because of the nature of it. I go back to Alan Dershowitz and his comments on it, saying that, look, this kind of behavior would be reserved for, the most serious of crimes. So if there is something there, you can bet it's a serious crime in terms of Cohen and what they might charge him with, what they might be looking for. To raid the office of a practicing attorney. And so, I just thought to myself, it reeks of desperation, knowing how it went down, that it was a referral from Mueller's office to the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. And again, we don't know what's on that warrant. We have no idea what they're looking for. But my question is, all right, exactly what would actually call for that kind of raid? And this goes back to my original question. You and I threw this around. And that is, why in the world would you see that as necessary? How is it that you felt that Cohen and his attorney were not cooperating on giving you documents or answering, responding to subpoenas or whatever it might be? I mean, it just seemed like way over the top. Again, we'll wait and see if there's a charge that comes out and there's evidence behind that charge. Then that's one thing. But I did, put that in the realm of possibilities. Is there something going on right now? Because if you think about it, if you were to if any given president, when Trump started the whole drain the swamp thing, if any given, new president, just somebody completely from the outside, comes in and then exposes something that has been status quo for who knows how long, and it was something, whether it, rose to abuse of power or whatever it might be, we have no idea, but just imagine it was some kind of wrongdoing or some kind of culture that at the very least, crossed a very clear ethical boundary, then that would be political fallout for how many people on Capitol Hill, not just at the Justice Department, but on Capitol Hill or anywhere else.
Well, and Cheryl Atkinson has made the claim, that this has been going on for years and that she personally, with her lawsuits, has been a victim of it from the Obama administration.
Right.
But we were talking about this during our pre-show meeting, and you said, how many Republicans or people that were served under Republican presidents in the intelligence communities might even be involved in this. But what is all this stalling about? When you see all of this stalling to not let our elected representatives who get to see the top secrets, when they stall and do everything possible, I look at it, and this is why I think you have probably members of the especially the House stating on the Hillary investigation and the FBI that they want a special counsel, because you really can't stop a special counsel. I think one of the concerns of some Republicans is if they can't wrap this thing up here in the next couple of months, then they want a special counsel, because if the Democrats get the House, all investigations stop.
Yeah.
It's done at that point. So you have to ask the question, and she may be getting to this, is the stall to do whatever you possibly can to say, look, we can outlast this for 2 years, and if we get the House back, well, then all those investigations stop. And the Senate, well, they seem to be pretty wishy-washy on it. And as long as the Republicans don't put a special counsel in, well, then all the investigations of Hillary, all the investigations of what the FBI did and the FISA warrants all go away.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the move to create cover for Mueller the other day and create this, protection, this new protection for the special counsel. And then add that to, going back to the whole NSA fallout. We asked the question, all right, where were the Republicans? We had two, Democrats, Wyden and Udall, that had concerns and repeatedly wrote the Justice Department with their concerns about the whole thing, saying that the FISA courts were mistaken and had grossly misinterpreted, in their opinion, that part of the Patriot Act. So when you talk about status quo, it's not always a proactive involvement. Sometimes it's just looking the other way or knowing of something, hearing of something, and not doing something about it. This is, what we were discussing during the pre-show meeting. How many Republicans, in that group might there be? Because if that culture did exist, and it existed for any period of time, because we go back to the, what the Circa News documents showed us and the concerns that the FISA courts had with the previous administration that went at least back to 2011. We have documents where they have issued concerns that state that much. So go back to 2011. Look at all of these committees, the oversight committees, and who was a part of them. And then tell Republican and Democrat, and tell me that if that was the culture at the Justice Department, at the FBI, and it was very much active and alive, it would be hard for me to believe that every Republican or every Democrat on that committee was clueless about that kind of behavior.
You and I go back, and the reason we mention Republicans here, because we know there's a lot of Republicans who don't like Donald Trump, and you and I specifically go back to the NSA and the secret FISA court ruling that they could look into the metadata of the cell phones of the American public, which of course they could not. And they remember the whole debate. Well, they claim they got it from the Patriot Act allowed it, and the writer of I can't remember who the member of Congress was who came out who actually wrote it, and the Patriot Act was one of the main creators of it, and said no, the Patriot Act in fact made it harder to do something like that, not easier to do that. But we go back to that time when it was two Democrats were the ones that wrote to the Justice Department saying what they are doing is wrong, what they're doing is illegal. We need to somehow stop this. It was two Democrats who did that. They couldn't come out publicly and do it. We only found out about it because of Snowden.
Right.
But the two Democrats were doing it. To this day, we don't know any Republicans that were upset about that and tried to do something to stop it. And we still ask that question today. Why? Because there were members of the House Intelligence and Senate Intelligence Committee that were Republicans, and to this date, there is no evidence or no coming forward by any Republican that said, "Oh yeah, we knew about it too, and it was wrong."
No claim at all.
Right, no claim. And we've always wondered why.
Why is that?
And so, how big is the swamp to hide it, and does it go across political boundaries?
Well,
would be the question.
And the NSA thing became a topic of national debate. I mean, we had even conservatives that were saying, no, they should be able to do that. It's about national security. And we said, no, and no. And so I can see that debate being had. That's my whole point, that I'm sure Wyden and Udall were having that debate with others on that oversight committee And
that's a great point. They had to bring it up to some Republicans who were privy to the same intelligence that they were. That discussion had to happen.
Right. And I would have to go back and I guess take a head count and find them on the position of whether or not they agreed with the NSA's behavior, whether they believed, whether they came out publicly after it was known, after Snowden, came out, because that would tell us. Because if they had the debate behind closed doors and those Republicans, or at least a number of them were saying, no, it's this is a matter of national security. And then they came out publicly later when it was known to the people that this was going on and they said the same thing, then I could say, okay, they were defending something. They believed that interpretation of that part of the Patriot Act was correct by the FISA courts. Then I could at least see some consistency. But I don't see
never
that
happened.
It never happened. And so this is where things start to fall short. So think about someone who goes in and says, gee, I wonder what's going on here, or points to something. Think about also the very it's not damning evidence, but the calling out of people on social media. Forget about his demeanor, but being so public about it, we've never had that. We've never had the calling out of that. That's unsettling if you're someone in a position of power that knows where the skeletons in the closet are, knows where the bodies are buried.
And when Atkinson wrote that yesterday, the first thing I thought of was, she's saying, okay, they're trying to get something on Trump first, so we forget about the investigation. Because here's the point. As you mentioned before, the violations of the Obama administration when it came to FISA warrants, we know goes back to at least 2011 and went on all the way to the end of his administration, because we know the FISA courts reprimanded them severely in late April of last year, of 2017. So we know that. I guess my point is, are they absolutely scared to death? This would be my question. The reason that they're fighting so much is because the Carter Page FISA warrant application is just the tip of the iceberg. And if you look at and take back what the FISA court said, that you can go back into the Obama administration all the way back, and you can find, 100, 200, 300, 400, 1,000 major violations of the FISA warrant application. That it's not just this one, but the reason that Comey and everybody else felt so safe to do this with Carter Page was not because they decided to try it once because it was so important, but that had become the culture to abuse the FISA warrant process over the entirety of the Obama administration.
It was just short of being official protocol.
Yeah.
In that theory. And think about this, which would also support why, even if you weren't a diehard liberal, your preference for president would be Hillary Clinton, certainly not a guy who is over the top outspoken and an outsider who's looking to drain the swamp.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. Coming up on the top of the hour, we will discuss the excerpts now coming out from James Comey Kardashian's new book.
And I was like, oh, my God, he's going to be president?
James Comey Kardashian. The excerpts that I've read, and you and I will get into more of it coming up on the top of the hour, I looked at you and I just said, This is childishness.
It's almost like they wrote this from something that he was texting a girlfriend. Yeah. And then you won't believe what OMG, you won't believe what he said next. I mean, seriously. It's just weird.
And the excerpts coming out yesterday, one of them in particular, he spins as if this is a concern about Trump and a fault against Trump. And I read it to you, and I just said, doesn't it show that Trump believes that he is innocent and wants the FBI director to look at some of these salacious allegations? He wanted them to investigate the dossier allegations.
Yeah.
Well, that's the last thing you do if you were guilty.
Right. The last person that he'd be talking to is you.
Right. And Comey's trying to spin it in some way that it was
based on what? His words, based on what the president said. Well, it's kind of bizarre. It really is.
Well, we'll read it to you. The excerpt's coming up here in a little bit.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. This is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, 866-90-RED-EYE. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. All right, so here we go.
All right, what do you got?
This from the Daily Mail UK, Fox News, variety of different resources out there. The fired FBI Director James Comey describes President Trump as untethered to truth and ego-driven. Really? In his explosive
I hadn't heard that.
In his explosive forthcoming book, A Higher Loyalty, according to excerpts obtained by the Associated Press and other news outlets on Thursday. In the book, I know.
Wow, that's explosive, Gary. You're telling me Donald Trump has an ego?
You ready for this one? This,
all right.
The Daily Mail. James Comey, the fired FBI director, is using his book published Tuesday to make bombshell claims about the president. Are you ready? Here we go.
Right.
Here are some of the excerpts now that have been released. It bothered, here it is, in the book, which hits the shelves April 17th, Comey goes as far as to question the strength of Trump's marriage to his wife, Melania, after revealing that Trump asked him to investigate salacious allegations about his actions with Russian prostitutes. It bothered President Trump if there was even a 1% chance his wife Melania thought it was true, Comey wrote, according to the New York Post. Later on, Comey mused, in what kind of marriage, to what kind of man does a spouse conclude that there is only a 99% chance her husband didn't do that, end of quote. I read that and I just went,
really?
Really? That's the conclusion?
That's not, you're missing the point.
Right. The conclusion I came to is you're the incoming FBI director who has been there with Obama.
Yeah.
Okay? You're the one who initially was all over the place in the Hillary investigation. You look at it and say, okay, how do people think? Okay, if Trump thought you were part of that administration, well then, and those allegations were already out as he was becoming president from the dossier, that if he knew they were true and he knew you were part of the FBI and you were part of her administration, he'd fire you and bring in somebody new from the very beginning. Why take the chance?
Well, that's the whole point. And when someone says, if I thought there was even 1% chance that she would think that, what he's saying is, I would never, ever want my wife thinking that. Right. Please make sure that you look into what's behind this.
Right.
And to your point, the larger point, that's the last person you would talk to if you believed it, if you knew, in this case, because he would know, it were true.
You look at that, and I think most investigators would look at that and say, okay, this guy wants me to investigate it.
Right. Yeah. And he's worried about the math. Right. Only 99%?
I mean,
that's not actually even the point.
I read that, and I just and here's the other thing too. And this sort of melds right into when he testified. You would sit there and say, a person doesn't think that way.
How is he FBI director? That kept repeating in my mind.
Right.
Remember.
I mean, an investigator doesn't think this way.
Right.
When he came out and said, when he talked about, Hillary Clinton, what she, what she did, and there was no intent, and it was brought up, and the intent was putting the server in the house. That's the intent.
Right.
Because that's breaking. You do that for a reason. You do that because you're hiding something. Mm-hmm. You don't do that for convenience.
Right.
Because you can still be on the system. You don't put the server in your house. That's the intent to hide right there.
Well, on Mahogany Row at the State Department, you can't even bring your cell phones.
Right.
She knew that. I mean, it was very clear what she knew, but he went out of his way. Well, I'm not sure she understood what the letter C stood for.
I've never understood, and this continues that. I've always been baffled as how he thinks. Because even during his testimony, we said, how can somebody think that way? How can you think that way? Even if you believe he's a genuine investigator and had no biases, it was still like, well, wait a minute. You don't think that way. Wait a minute. You didn't take any notes when you interviewed Hillary? Wait a minute. Investigations don't go this way. And he makes it sound, when he came out, remember he said, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute.
Right.
What are you talking about? Well, and he said no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute, this before. It's never been prosecuted before. Well, this because there's never been a Secretary of State who did that. That's why it was never prosecuted before. Mm-hmm. But has somebody been prosecuted for doing something similar? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And the way that he was answering his questions before Congress, when he was on Capitol Hill, both times I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. Because I can't speak to his work at the FBI, but what I can speak to is how he phrased his answers. The language and his demeanor while he was there. Well, now you add to it the book and the style of writing. And I was asking back then, after he testified twice, how was this guy ever FBI director? Because I know people who are in criminal investigation, not at the FBI director level, but this is the point. If you're going to talk to them about methodology or maybe an investigation, they're going to be very clear and concise with you. And you're going to know you're talking to someone who knows what they're doing, somebody who's capable of critical thinking. His answers on Capitol Hill were bizarre, and the book is just weird.
Well, I don't know if the book's weird. That claim is weird.
Well,
the excerpts are weird.
That's the whole point. I've read 4 or 5 so far, and they all sound like they come out of Khloe Kardashian's diary.
This is why we're calling it the James Comey Kardashian biography. It goes, this wasn't the only personal jab at Trump. The Associated Press reported that Comey, who stands 6'8", described the president as shorter than he expected, with a, quote, too long tie and bright white half moons under his eyes that he suggested came from tanning goggles. He also said he made a conscious effort to check the president's hand size, briefly a subject of mockery among Trump's Republican rivals on the campaign trail, saying that it was smaller than mine, but did not seem unusually so. That's a quote from the book. And you and I looked at each other and said, what the hell kind of investigator?
Why is that? Why is that in the book?
Why would that even be in the book? Why, to me, we said this is, and when I read that too, we were talking about in our pre-show meeting, you said he's a Kardashian.
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like these are text messages sent back and forth between the Kardashians. Right.
Then here's a few other things. He said he described Trump's presidency as a forest fire. Really? and wrote that his interactions with the administration recalled my earlier career as a prosecutor against the mob. Here it is. The silent circle of assent, the boss in complete control, the loyalty oaths, the us versus them worldview.
Is he describing Obama or Trump?
Well, that's the whole thing. In any presidency, you're going to have them go through times when that's exactly the way that it seems to you if you work for that particular person.
Right.
Of course, us versus them. You don't think Obama had that mindset?
Right.
You don't think the members of the Bush administration and the Clinton administration didn't have that mindset? And remember, this president, especially at the beginning of his presidency, where the claim was from the Democrats and the media that we need to investigate this president for treasonous action of colluding with the Russians to hack the election.
Mm-hmm.
That's what was going on at that time, right there in that January period when he's talking about the president.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the president knows in his mind, I didn't do any of these things. These are salacious. All these things coming out about me with prostitutes. I want you to investigate that. Oh, okay. That was really strange for the president to do that. Not really.
No.
But I thought the most interesting thing here is when he takes a shot at the Department of Justice and Loretta Lynch. This may be the to me at least, the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
In an excerpt obtained by ABC News, Comey also revealed that he felt he had to take a more prominent role in the Clinton investigation because of unverified classified information about then Attorney General Loretta Lynch.
Mm-hmm.
According to ABC, Comey wrote that, quote, the source and content of that material remains classified as I write this, end of quote. However, he added that if the information had become public, it, quote, would undoubtedly have been used by political opponents to cast serious doubt on the Attorney General's independence in connection with the Clinton investigation, end of quote. Wow. You want the biggest thing that so far has come out of the excerpts? It's that.
Well, he basically just said that that Lynch covered for Hillary. Tell me otherwise. He's not saying that.
Now, he said unverified at that time. He wouldn't have access to that material now, so we don't know whether it has been verified or not since he has been fired.
He felt brave enough to put it in the book.
He felt brave enough to put it in the book, and what he said was that's the reason that he went forward and took charge over what she should have been doing was because he was afraid. Well, did you have that discussion with her?
Right.
Because if that's my boss, I would have a discussion about the unverified classified information that showed that you had a huge conflict of interest with Hillary Clinton. And then after the airport thing, you felt you had to take over. Well, it was more than just the airport thing then that Comey took charge. Because that's a given. It was because of this other information. Well, did you have a discussion with her out there? Did you investigate this? Did you ask her whether this was true or not? Because this had the potential to blow your entire investigation and taint your entire investigation. I want to know, were those questions asked by Stephanopoulos? We'll find out when the full interview is done.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they weren't, then Stephanopoulos isn't doing his job, because those are the questions that I would ask.
Look, if you're a disgruntled ex-government employee, you're not going to, I'm guessing you're not going to like the guy that fired you. So the whole thing, all the things about Trump, those are a given.
That he's ego-driven.
He's ego-driven. And he asked me to look into those rumors about the prostitutes because he wasn't 100% sure. He was only 99% sure.
No, but he didn't really say that, did he?
Yeah.
Comey is
he didn't.
Comey's trying to imply that's what he was saying, but that's not.
Well, but here,
even the way he explains it is not what he said.
Well, it's not. Because what he's saying is if there's any doubt, I don't want any doubt in my wife's mind about something like that. I'd like you to look into that and see how that happened.
And so when I read that, I said, I went right back to much of the testimony that was so frustrating because you went, a critical thinker, investigator doesn't think that way. And so when I read this and what he said about Trump and Melania and Trump wanting to have him investigate the salacious allegations and the conclusion he came to, I said, this isn't a critical thinking investigator. Again, first thing that hit my mind, this is not how an investigator, this is not the type of critical thinking that you do if you're looking for the crime.
Because what do you rely on in any investigation?
Evidence.
Facts. Evidence. Something that's clear. Something that, and also unveiling something that you have not learned. Finding something new, right? So if you're looking at a book and you're approaching it from somebody who used to be in his position, then you would look at that, and my approach would be, okay, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to write it not like a report, because a report's going to be boring, but certainly I'm going to be more clinical and factual, making the bizarre Kardashian-like comments about the guy who fired him. That's a given.
I don't know so far if these are the excerpts as they want to get. These are the highlights, and this is the meat.
Is this the bombshell?
If these are the bombshells, it does more disservice to the Obama administration and the credibility of Comey than anything about Trump.
Here's the thing. Stephanopoulos, I know he's asked this question. I know he asked it. Do you believe that Trump or someone in his campaign worked with the Russians to change the election results or influence the election? Do you believe that people are guilty of doing that?
You don't think that would be in the promo?
If he didn't ask that question, I don't know the point of the whole interview. Because, by the way, that's what you're looking. Right. That's what people will think they're going to hear.
That's a great point.
Whether you're not going to air the answer, but if you didn't ask that question, then you didn't do your job.
Right, you just show the question being answered, and then the camera close up on Comey's face.
Right. No answer. Wait until Sunday night.
Right.
You get the answer.
86. See, we know how to do promotionals.
Yes, we do.
866-90 Red Eye.
The dates and location for the 36th annual Shell Rotella Super Rigs contest are set. Dave Waterman from Shell has the details.
We are going to be at White's Travel Center in Raphine, Virginia. It's a little bit outside of Lexington, Virginia, right off of I-81 and I-64. It was designed way back when as a way for Shell Rotella to give back to the trucking community, appreciation for all they did and all the support of our brand. It's an event that really encourages truckers to get together, whether they're going to show a show caliber truck or just their daily driver that might have some scratches and dings in it. It's open to all of them. And in fact, we encourage, as you know, the working truck. Judging, of course, is going to take place Thursday through Saturday. We're going to have a light contest taking place on Thursday, and then we'll do a truck parade down to Old Town Lexington. There's also be health checks available for truckers on site. We're going to do the scavenger hunt again so folks can walk away with prizes. Just on the Shell Rotella Super Rigs part of it, it's up to $25,000 in both cash and prizes.
They want to learn more. Where do they go?
Well, they can go to Rotella.com. They can also go to whitestravelcenter.com.
Meritor's Driver Report, brought to you by TA Truck Service Road Squad. If you break down, we show up. 800-924-SHOP.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley. I'm Gary McNamara. And so I started wondering, so they've got it at Sunday, this James Comey Kardashian interview. They have Sunday night at 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
I went, why? Why is it being buried?
Sunday night's a pretty high viewership for TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because to me, I just thought Sunday night, 10 p.m. seems to be.
Yeah, it's a pretty, in fact.
Okay, it's 9 p.m. Central and 8 p.m.
Right.
Okay.
And it would also be after, I think, The Walking Dead, which still has pretty high ratings, which their end of season 8 is on Sunday night, so they're trying not to butt it up against that.
Okay,
compete with zombies.
Thank you for explaining that you can't compete with zombies.
Well, the thing is that Sunday night television really is where you would want to air something like this. Maybe Thursday night, but Thursday and Sunday tend to be big.
Yeah, I just thought
audiences.
it would be earlier. I don't know why.
Yeah. You mean earlier in the evening?
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I think that's actually a great point, because I would put it up against a 60 Minutes. Because they're doing it's a 2020 special, is what it is.
And that's and to me, to have a 2020 special and somehow fit it in
right
earlier and even go up against 60 Minutes, even as a special,
or maybe you look to get all of the above and don't compete with the other big shows, because 60 Minutes would be big at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then you've got Zombies apparently, and then you have that one to cap off the night before people go to bed. And that's the other thing too. If it is something that, I don't know, reveals something, if we learn something in the interview, I have my doubts, then that carries over. That's the last thought that people go to bed with.
Using sophisticated, secure communications channels. Gary and Eric on Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. And just so you know, if any more excerpts come out while we're on the air throughout the morning from James Comey Kardashian's new book, we'll have them for you. But really, what has come out so far seems to be more damaging to the Obama administration than it is to Trump. Trump is driven by his ego.
Yeah.
No. Really?
Because, going back to...
So are you.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And you're not. The whole thing, what I was talking about earlier about, the question that, the one question that I would think would be the must ask is, do you believe that anyone from the Trump administration, currently in the administration or staff, or with the campaign at that time, worked with the Russians to influence the election in any way? That would be the question you would have to ask. Because the question that he was asked on Capitol Hill was, and it was something along the lines, a number of agencies now believe, and there's a consensus now that, Mr. Comey, that they believe that the Russians were working to influence the election. Not Trump, not Trump campaign, just the Russians. The questions on Capitol Hill were about the Russians. And then he went on that whole thing, the fake outrage or passion or whatever you want to call it. I have no doubt it went all the way to the top. And we asked, of the United States government or the Russian government, because we'd like to know if Obama was involved. But that would be the TV question. Do you believe? Now, likely the answer would be, it's inappropriate for me to comment on something that I believe Robert Mueller is working hard on, and would, that would be, I think, detrimental to his efforts, and certainly I shouldn't comment, but it is definitely worth pursuing, something to that.
I know that I would respond, and so your problems, the president is driven by his ego, has an us versus them mentality, and lies.
Yeah.
Okay, we talking Obama now, or are we talking Trump? But
exactly.
We're talking about it.
Yeah, right.
So but these are bombshells.
His tie was too long.
His tie was too long.
What?
I did check the size of his hands. When I got to that point, but really the main thing of the excerpts that came out about Trump was, again, and he asked me to investigate the salacious allegations against him. Well, yeah, duh.
Right.
Why is that a negative?
Does that sound like somebody who is guilty?
Right. And
what I would ask the question, when's the last time anybody that was accused of anything went to you and asked you to look into it officially?
I mean, that's a great question. That gets back to the frustration when he was testifying. Again, and I'll mention it one more time, where I would say, this doesn't sound like a guy who's a critical thinker as an investigator. And when that's the first thing I saw when I saw that excerpt. I said, that's not somebody who's a critical thinker or investigator, because the first thing you would think of, oh, this guy wants me to investigate? Oh, okay, well, yeah, Mr. President, we haven't found anything, with it yet, but yeah, we'll continue to investigate it. Yeah, investigate it, because, even if 1% of my wife thinks these allegations are true, that would bother me. That's not an odd thing for a man to say.
No. I would never want her to
Right.
even have a single thought of something like this. Please look into it for me. That's basically what the president was saying.
So, again, that made no sense. But like I said, the thing that I think is most telling of the excerpts that came out is it makes what we got yesterday, what was leaked or purposely leaked from the book, damaged the Obama administration more than it did Trump at all.
Right.
Well, the reason that I sort of had to take over was because of the unverified top secret material out that would make people believe that the Attorney General had a huge conflict of interest, in the whole Hillary thing. Well, yeah, thank you. I'm sure that Republicans are going, thank you for that one.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see, because if these are the bombshells, and you always sit there and when you've got something coming up, and this is where, by the way, this is where we can understand how things work, like Facebook, because we found out this week, the American public was shocked to find out that Facebook's actual reason for existing is to make billions and not to give you a place where you can get together with your high school buddies to have an online high school reunion.
They're making money off of your behavior on their website. How dare they?
Yeah, and so we found that out. And to understand, 2020 and George Stephanopoulos want the biggest audience possible that they can get. So any hint of bombshells, and that's what came out here. The report was these are bombshells against Trump. We're still looking for the bombshells because we don't see any bombshells. And so you wonder whether the interview will just be a great big thud and is more Kardashian-like about his personal dislike for Trump and not really any of the legalities at all.
Well, and you asked that question going into the break earlier, and because we know this is how you build, a promo. You ask that very serious question that is on everybody's mind. And then, of course, you don't play the answer. That's the tease to tune in for Sunday night. Now, I've watched a couple of different promos. I haven't seen anything like that just yet. Because if they're promoting bombshell, if the book is going to be a bombshell or the interview is going to be a bombshell, it's going to reveal something we don't know. That's what you're telling me.
Here's another question that I would ask, and let's see if Stephanopoulos asks this because we don't know. But I would ask specifically, there were two questions I would ask about the Hillary investigation because I believe they're extremely pertinent. Maybe three questions. One would be, here's the law concerning the server. Here's the law that Republicans state and others state that she broke in the espionage law. Right here. Here it is.
Yeah.
Here where okay, here's the other part of the law where it says grossly negligence. So I guess I combined two questions into one. Your original memo said grossly negligent, which is the legal term for filing charges for prosecution to Hillary Clinton. It was changed. Did you approve that change? And why did you first use grossly negligent, which absolutely is the text of the law showing that she committed a crime, and change that? So maybe I almost have three questions.
Yes,
almost in there. I sort of combine them in my head as one complete question because that's what people want to know. We know, and I would say this: we know that other people have gone to jail for things that she did.
Right.
You're stating that nobody else has done this. Well, of course they couldn't have, because nobody else was Secretary of State and did this.
Right.
So there were only a few people that had the position of Secretary of State, and before that, computers didn't exist. So there is no legal precedent for a person committing this act in that particular position. But people committing these types of acts, which would result in classified information being outside of classified areas, and the purpose is to hide it from government archives, it can be used against you later on, is the allegation. That in itself would be the intent.
Well,
I think that question will be asked or that statement will be made. I don't think so.
Coming from the former communications director for the Clintons, no.
Oh.
He would have to recuse himself from the interview.
I momentarily forgot that.
Yeah. He would have to recuse himself from the interview. Where are you going, George? Somebody else is going to ask you the next question. Yeah, I doubt it.
Or maybe he...
by the way, I would be pleasantly surprised if he went that direction. That would be great. I don't anticipate that.
Well, maybe George can get his wife on and she can just, do what the interview might be. Yeah, schmoopy, 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 oh, schmoopy. For those who don't know, George Stephanopoulos is married to, what's her name? Allie? I can't think of her name.
I don't recall.
Oh, Stephanopoulos now.
Well, what's her last name?
His wife is the actress who played the opposite Seinfeld for the whole schmoopy episode. Remember when they were schmoopy, schmoopy? That's George Stephanopoulos' wife, for people that don't know. They're going to make it a schmoopy interview where nothing really serious is talked about, because that's what I'd sit there and say, look, you may care about it. I think the American people really don't care about the size of the hands. Let's get to be adults here and talk about the adult things of an investigation of, number one, a former Secretary of State using a private server, therefore allowing top secrets, was apparently as important to Democrats. Letting out top secrets used to be important to them. And let's go through the specifics of this, and then we'll go through the specifics of Donald Trump and Russian collusion. But I'd rather not stick to the car. And I would say this is why I could never be an interviewer. But let's stay away from the Kardashian-like things of how big are his hands. Let's try to be adults here if we possibly can. Adults that were in top leadership positions of the United States government, if we can possibly do that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might be, I don't know, the better approach. But apparently, it wasn't.
I'm sorry, I went off the rails here. I was fantasizing in a world that doesn't exist.
Well, I came up with a new drinking game. How many shots of whatever your favorite liquor is can you do before you can no longer say schmoopy Stephanopoulos?
Is it Allie Thompson? Was that her name?
Is that her name?
I can't.
Okay.
I don't know.
Right.
I think it's. I know it's Allie. I know that.
Yeah.
Now I have to look it up.
Oh wait, I've got it. I think I have it right here. Right?
What, you have the?
Well, I have his wiki page up, but it doesn't say. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Alexandra Wentworth.
Yes, Allie Wentworth. Yes,
yeah.
That's right. Okay, yeah. There she is. The picture just came up.
And two lovely children.
It's Schmoopy.
Yeah, there you go.
She was on with Seinfeld on, what is it, the car thing.
Oh,
Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. Yeah.
Is she doing stand-up, or do they just have her on because of the show?
They just had her on because of the show.
Oh, okay.
And it was actually pretty good.
Yeah. I bet. So. It'll be interesting to see what questions are asked. Because if this turns into basically just a, disgruntled employee interview, that's what it's going to seem like. An exit interview with a disgruntled employee. His tie was too long.
Again, the excerpts come out because they wish them to come out. They believe
they choose them.
They choose them because that's what they believe will draw an audience.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's my question: Is that what it's come to? Keep in mind, Stephanopoulos works, for Good Morning America. A lot of what they do now is they'll play silly animal videos from YouTube. Hey, did you see the one of the laughing goat? Maybe it'll be the largest audience ever.
It's good to see that they found something that George is qualified to do.
Exactly.
And I think that's
a laughing goat.
All right. if you want to get in on this discussion. And I don't know why you would, but if you would, we do have a line open, 866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. Coming up on the top of the hour, this is really interesting because this goes back to the point that we have said that the left, in their identity politics, keeps separating people by their different characteristics.
Right.
That they eventually pit allies against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. We'll tell you about the gay pride parade that bans drag queens over fears that they will offend transgendered people.
Oh, see? We told you.
I read the headline, and it hurt because I said, okay, I got to figure this out now. Before I read the article, I got to figure this out because I'm getting confused now, but this is where it's going.
Right. Yes.
This is why we're doomed.
Well, because, again, there must be a new reason to be offended, even by that person that was just marching with you next to you in that parade. That's offensive.
So we will get to that. Plus the Molly Ringwald attacking the Breakfast Club. Did you hear that? Because of Me Too.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That what was his name?
Judd Nelson.
Judd Nelson's character.
Right.
Basically harassed her and never apologized in the Breakfast Club.
In the fictional setting. To be clear. As a matter of the script.
Yes, some of you who grew up in that time period might have thought it was a biographical documentary.
Right. Well, we're not. She's not accusing Judd Nelson of any wrongdoing. The actor.
Right.
It's the characters that didn't make amends.
Well, the late John Hughes is to blame.
Yes, of course. For writing it that way.
The script should have been different.
Yes.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. This is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, 866-90-RED-EYE. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Just asking you just a brief question here during the top of the hour, because I thought about this yesterday. I said, why does anybody on the left like James Comey? Hillary Clinton will tell you the reason she's not president of the United States is because of James Comey.
Right. He brought the investigation back.
Right. So if she's the first, she'll tell. She's been out there. I don't care whether it's India or here in the United States. She's telling everybody, I lost because Comey brought the investigation back up.
Right.
And so I really wonder, I'm sure the media will be sympathetic towards him. I haven't seen any analysis yet. We did our analysis. I haven't seen or read any analysis yet because there's so many other topics on anybody else who has looked at, so far the excerpts and came to our conclusion, wow, the excerpts that came out make the Obama administration look worse and basically, actually, when you actually go through it, make Trump look better. And reiterate what his critics have said. He's driven by his ego. Okay, and next. So I just had to ask that question. Why is any Democrat supporting James Comey? Because they believe that. Do they actually believe the obstruction of justice thing? Well, that's maybe the last thing we can get Trump on is obstruction of justice for firing Comey. Can't. He's allowed to do that. That's not obstruction of justice. You have to understand it. Have you noticed that that's even been dropped the last month? You don't even hear obstruction of justice as much anymore with Comey's firing? I don't, on social media at least. I'm not saying
No.
it's not out there.
No. I really don't. I mean, it's...
I've just sensed that it doesn't seem to have the intensity anymore that we can get on my structure. It's sort of moving to Stormy Daniels now. What I've noticed.
I was going to say, everything evolves right now because they keep moving.
Next thing.
They move the goalpost all the time.
I think Dershowitz said that yesterday. He goes, the goalposts keep moving. Oh no, it's this one now, this one now, this one now.
And this is where we are. I mean, we're at the Cohen raid this week, and then Paul Ryan stepping down, and all the GOP is quitting on him, and all that. So it becomes something new every day. The Comey thing is like old news. I don't know how long it takes to put a book together, but based on what we've read so far, it wouldn't be very long, right? Because it's. I look at it as this. It's interesting because Newsweek did their version on the part where he's asking Trump is asking Comey to look into the whole story on the Russian prostitutes thing. Well, think about what that was. What would that have been, right? And it's not just about Melania, but I mean, if it had happened to Barack Obama, and Barack Obama were saying it would break my heart if my wife thought for a moment that something like this were true. But aside from that personal note, which, by the way, often happens in a intimate setting between a one-on-one between a president and anybody else, there might be a personal note that they mention, where they bring something up, about family, a spouse, whatever it might be. Think about what that whole thing was. I mean, these were the salacious things that were designed to do what? To delegitimize the election, to throw the election, to influence the election ultimately, right? I mean, that was part of it. So instead of focusing on that part of it, and that's what I would have looked at it, I would have said, okay, well, the investigator in me or my agency is designed, the Bureau is designed to look into things like this. This is, in fact, part of the whole deal right now. Russian involvement. Why wasn't it viewed that way? Instead, he wanted to kind of parse words with the president about the whole thing, the 99% versus the 1%, which wasn't the point the president was making in the first place. I just found it to be really bizarre because you've mentioned before, Gary, as we've kind of, laid things out here and reading pieces of this book and picking it apart, it's not coming from an investigative mind at all. Not at all. I would think that if you're someone like James Comey and you believe President Trump is a petty, simple-minded, dishonest person, you would work really hard to set yourself apart from him. And what we've heard so far from the book sounds pretty petty.
Here's one thing. What was it? Remember when Comey talked about the fact that he didn't want to damage the reputation of anyone.
The integrity of the agents.
The integrity of the agents or the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. That was his major goal.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's why, he wouldn't leak. Then he immediately went out and leaked.
I would never leak because I wanted to. Right. I never would compromise, and the first thing he did was leaked.
Well, wait a minute. Comey has revealed that he felt he had to take a more prominent role in the Clinton investigation because of the unverified classified information about then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Nobody knew about this or talked about this. I haven't heard anybody until Comey apparently wrote this in the book. He wrote that the source and content of the material remains classified as I write it. However, he added that if the information has become public, it would undoubtedly have been used by political opponents to cast serious doubt on the Attorney General's independence in connection with the Clinton investigation, end of quote. Isn't he damaging the integrity of the Department of Justice and Loretta Lynch and everybody who works under her and everybody else by coming out with that in the book? I thought he cared about the integrity of the Department of Justice.
This is exactly what we were getting to earlier this week, and we didn't even know. I wasn't even aware of that excerpt when I said that earlier this week.
I know you did.
You know, that's because you look at the behavior of someone. What they say is one thing. The behavior of someone is it can often be the real tell about who they are. So when he talked about protecting the integrity of those agents and never compromising all of the hours of work and, you know, that they, and by the way, I would be right there with you, except for the part right up to that point where you got fired and ran to your buddy and leaked and then decided, you know, to go write the whole tell-all book and then through your former attorney general that you served under, your boss. Under the proverbial bus. I'm sorry, how's that integrity thing going? Are you still working to uphold that integrity there, Mr. Comey? Just asking a question.
Yeah, so my question is, I mean, I just wonder what the polling would be on Comey with Democrats right now.
You know, I don't know. Yeah. It's hard to tell because, you know, remember it went back and forth. Remember during the testimony it went back and forth, right? Uh-huh. And you had Democrats that were grilling him, and then all of a sudden, you know, he's back a month or two later, and then they were praising him. Look, it's you know, what have you done for us lately? And if this were to be some kind of damaging, you know, book, if it ends up revealing something critical, which I suspect it won't, then, you know, that would be one thing. They could latch on to that. Otherwise, they basically have somebody in James Comey that is a disgruntled former government employee that, breaking news, is no longer on the Trump train.
Was he ever on?
Well, there's the thing. What are you geniuses thinking? Why don't we get, hold on a second, why don't we get Chuck Schumer to write a book? Keith Olbermann. I know. We'll get Keith Olbermann to write a book. It's just bizarre. It really is. Again, if we learn something that we didn't know before, that would be one thing.
Well, the only thing we learned is that apparently there's top secret information out there that the political opposition would have used to show that the Department of Justice, the head of the Department of Justice, had a huge conflict of interest being over the Hillary investigation.
Yes. I really don't. I honestly don't know what else you might get out of this. Because if you think about anything that they might have on Trump, well, Comey's not the guy. That would be Mueller's tell-all book, not Comey's.
Right. So I just it would be interesting to see what comes out of all of this. But the excerpts so far actually damage the Obama administration
in terms of real stuff,
of real stuff that's actually of importance. Besides, you know, the fact that Comey had to make sure that he observed the size of Trump's hand.
Yeah.
Let's go to Bill in Illinois. Bill, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi, Bill.
Hello, sir. Hey, I was kind of nervous because this is the first time I've ever called you guys.
Well, thank you.
But I'd like to know, this is what I'd like to know, is how come the Supreme Court has not gotten involved in this? Because, look, there's three equal branches of the government, and all we're seeing is the legislature trying to bring down the executive. Now, why don't they step in and tell them exactly what the law is?
Because that's not their role. The Supreme Court, if for example, I mean, I saw today NBC News, I think, put out that both the special prosecutor Mueller and the administration, the president are now
They're moving on.
They're moving on.
No interview.
That there's not going to be an interview.
Right.
And it looks like Mueller isn't going to put a subpoena out. That's what I got from it. They didn't say it specifically, but he's not going to put a subpoena out to get Donald Trump to testify, which then Trump might go to the Supreme Court or Mueller might go to the Supreme Court. But you would have to, one side or the other, would have to petition the Supreme Court to get involved, and neither side has done that. The Supreme Court just doesn't say, hey, we don't like that, we're going to get involved in that. Now, some members would like to do that, but that isn't how it works.
Oh, yeah. There are some that would love to intervene.
Right. You have to get to the Supreme Court, you have to petition the Supreme Court. You have to say, okay, we're going to the Supreme Court on this. And you know, when it comes to, presidential discretion, or I can't think of the term here, when it comes to the president being able to keep things secret.
Yeah.
That go on in this administration.
Executive privilege.
Executive privilege. Those things have gone before the Supreme Court before, but nobody has filed a petition or a complaint with the court. Right. So the Supreme Court just doesn't get involved in stuff. They only get involved in stuff when when it gets up to the legal point where they're supposed to get involved in it, and that's because somebody has filed a petition with some court that eventually gets to the Supreme Court, or at times gets fast-tracked to the Supreme Court. But they just don't say, well, we don't like this, we're going to stop it. That's not their role.
Right.
So hope that answers your question. 866-90-RED-EYE.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye. Already getting a response on promoting the story earlier about Molly Ringwald and the Breakfast Club and her piece in the New Yorker about it. And this is just the best thing ever, because a political writer out there who's well respected, who said, I can't believe I have to explain the Breakfast Club to Molly Ringwald. And so we'll have that coming up, because it is it's hilarious, because he goes actually through it. He's like, I never thought I'd have to, but that's where we are right now. I have to explain. I'm not saying this. He's saying it. I actually have to explain the Breakfast Club to the star of the Breakfast Club, who apparently didn't understand what the script was about. So we'll get to that here. But news is this story has not gone viral. I do credit ABC for carrying it. It's actually a few days old. And in all my scanning, I didn't see it anywhere until I just happened to see it on my phone. And I don't even know how it came up on my phone. I don't even. I've been just scanning different stuff on my computer, and then on my, it's funny, because even though we got the computers and everything else, I still use my phone to check stories, even when I'm on the air. But here it is. Trump nominates first African-American woman to be Marine Brigadier General. Secretary of Defense James Mattis announced the historic nomination on Tuesday. If confirmed, Marine Corps Colonel Lorna Maylock will be the first African-American female to serve as Brigadier General, according to the Marine Corps Office of Public Affairs. Right now, Maylock is the Deputy Director of Operations, Plans and Policies and Operations Director at the Marine Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C. The Marine Corps is the smallest of the four military services, and the branch has the fewest female service members, according to the Marine Corps Community Services. So to wrap this up, Donald Trump has nominated the first African-American woman to be Marine Brigadier General, of course, because he's a racist.
Yes.
There you go. Had to get that out.
Right. And a sexist.
Oh, and a sexist. Yes. So just we have to, because that's the first thing that.
Yeah.
I got to see, did they try to spin the article in the end?
Many believe he's only doing it to try and make it seem like he's not a racist or a sexist. They always do that. Many people would say, who are those many people?
Some people.
Some people are saying, some people say that you're not presidential.
Some more on the James Comey book coming up. Some of your comments, if you'd like to get aboard, we do have a line open, 866-90 Red Eye, plus a bunch of different other stories out there. The one that actually did go viral yesterday was that 4 in 10 millennials didn't know 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust.
Wow.
And just about history, and I'm thinking to myself, well, this is basic history. This is failure of our education system. Why? How did I know about the Holocaust? We were taught about it in schools, and you knew about it. It was emphasized. You were tested on these things. Why? It's all a part of history.
I mean, it's also a part of world history that has been very much discussed in the open, I won't say in pop culture, but outside of school class settings. I don't know how many times.
Yep.
Well, I mean, as a part of pop culture, certainly with the movies, I don't know how you would miss something like that. 866-90 Red Eye, here's your forecast.
We have a major storm system bringing heavy snow to portions of some northern tier states. You're going to want to watch it in North Dakota along I-94, especially western North Dakota, and western South Dakota along I-90. As much as 20 inches of snow can be expected in parts of that region and in northern Nebraska. We're talking north of I-80, though, for the most part. In these overnight hours, you could see some icing due to the moisture to the south of I-80 and then the colder winds to the north of I-80. That same storm system is likely to fire off some severe weather today. Some deep southerly moisture moving in and a low-pressure area will couple to create some potential flash flooding for the Mississippi Valley today. Look for thunderstorms, damaging winds, and hail at a minimum today for a good portion of Arkansas and eastern Kansas. Your national forecast from Red Eye Radio. I'm meteorologist John Trout.
Thanks so much, John. 866-90 Red Eye.
The Bonus Show.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. You know, I saw the story over the weekend, or not over the weekend, but over the last week. I don't know exactly when, but it was, Molly Ringwald and the whole Me Too movement, and she wasn't happy with the Breakfast Club, and, wrote apparently an op-ed piece or whatever in the New Yorker to say that the movie wasn't sufficiently woke.
Okay.
To use that word. Now, it was just what caught my attention was going to Breitbart and seeing John Nolte, who's a good writer.
Mm-hmm.
He was gone for a while, and I believe he used to be with them and then came back. I mean, when Bannon left, he came back. And Nolte's a good writer. He's a critical thinker. Don't always agree with him, but he's a critical thinker. That's all I care about. I don't care whether I agree with you, whether you're a critical thinker. And apparently he grew up in that time. That was just a little bit past my time. When did that come out? 85? 84, 85?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
When did Simple Minds song came out? That's when the movie was popular.
Yeah, that was right there. Yeah.
Don't you forget about me. Mm-hmm. So, my God, can you believe that is, if it's 85, that's 33 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Eric?
I graduated high school 84. Yeah.
Eric?
Mm-hmm.
We're old.
Yeah. Well, one of us is.
So that was even that was huge for you then. I mean, huge, not maybe for you personally.
I was a metalhead, so not so much, yeah.
Right.
But it was one of the popular movies,
right.
Yeah. And I was actually already doing radio, so yeah.
It was written, directed by the late John Hughes, who died in 2009, released in 85.
Mm-hmm.
And as John Nolte writes, he goes, The Breakfast Club is a cultural touchstone for anyone who came of age during the Reagan era. That includes me.
Mm-hmm.
He says Ringwald's primary complaint about the movie is that that after her character, Claire, is sexually harassed by Judd Nelson's character, John Bender, he never apologizes for any of it, but nevertheless gets the girl in the end. talks about Bender's, and that would be Judd Nelson's character.
Right.
Boorish behavior includes a scene where he peeks up Claire's skirt, and it is implied that he gropes her. She writes, Bender sexually harasses Claire throughout the film. When he's not sexualizing her, he takes out his rage on her with vicious contempt, calling her pathetic, mocking her as a queenie. She concludes that it was Claire's rejection that inspired his anger and hatred. And this is where I said I got to bring this up on the air. Mm-hmm. It was when Nolte says, I honestly cannot believe I have to explain The Breakfast Club to the star of The Breakfast Club. And he writes about, the whole thing in the movie. It's a Saturday, and the five high schoolers are forced to spend the day together in detention.
Well, and Judd Nelson, his character's made to look like kind of the worst of them. Right. Like the hoodlum of the group.
And that's the whole point. They go, there's a smug jock, Emilio Estevez is a character, the brainy geek, Anthony Michael Hall, the introverted head case, Ali Sheedy, and the stuck-up prom queen, Claire, Molly Ringwald, and then the delinquent, that was Judd Nelson. Yeah. Safely sheltered in the bubble of their respective cliques, these are five individuals who have gone to school together for years, but have never even said hello in passing. At first, you might expect each retreats into the safety of their own corner, and in doing so epitomizes their own stereotype. Andy and Claire act superior, except for a few bizarre outbursts. Allison remains in her shell. Brian is hopelessly awkward. Bender, that's Judd Nelson's character, is all belligerence. Over the next 90 minutes, though, the group unifies to rebel against their situation and their insufferable warden, the vice principal, Richard Dick Vernon. In doing so, reluctantly, they get to know each other, right? It's about the camaraderie that is eventually built from people that don't relate to each other whatsoever.
A group of people who had kids who had nothing in common, and at the end became friends.
Yes. Some music, some weed, and a few close calls later, they loosen up and discover they have much more in common than not. The most important thing they discover, however, is that they're all fronting as stereotypes as a defense mechanism. The whole point of the movie is that beneath these off-putting archetypes, there is also a whole person, someone worth knowing, someone even that you could get close to. For example, we learn that deep down, Claire is not a prissy, uptight snob. She is merely behaving that way in a way that her friends and parents expect her to behave. Incredibly, and even though she just watched the movie again as a 50-year-old woman, Ringwald still sees Bender only as a sexist pig and cannot see past the stereotype. To begin with, Bender is only 17 for crying out loud. This is how 17-year-old boys behave. Hughes was always aiming for reality when it came to his teen films. What's more, and this is important, Hughes does not present Bender's behavior as cool or edgy. Rather, Bender is he uses a word I'm not going to use here, and a bully and a jerk, too. And not just to Claire, but to everyone. The audience is not on Bender's side.
No, he's not the good guy at the beginning, no.
And then comes a moment when we and Claire discover that at the hands of his own father, Bender is the product of horrible abuse, both physical and verbal. In other words, Bender's thuggish behavior does not come from a sense of privilege or sexual entitlement. He is not Al Franken or Harvey Weinstein. Bender's attitude is his shield, what he holds in front of him to avoid opening himself up to even more pain. His antagonism towards all comers is meant to keep people away, most especially Claire, because his feelings for her terrify him. Ringwald writes, it's the rejection that inspires his anger. No, that's exactly wrong. It's not rejection that inspires his piggish behavior. It is fear, white-hot, blinding panic. That's the whole point of his confession, that extraordinary moment when he finally opens up. Bender is not a spoiled child lashing out when he does not get what he wants. He is the exact opposite, a wounded, broken, and abused child on the path to prison or worse. And then something amazingly happens, something that has been happening since the beginning, the miracle of a woman's love. I just had to read that because I just got such a kick out of it that John Nolte felt the fact that he had to set Molly. And if you've read John Nolte, most of the stuff he writes is on politics and issues and all that. But to sit there and when I read that line where he said, "Here, I can't believe I've actually got to tell the star of a Breakfast Club what the movie was about."
Exactly.
We could go further with John Hughes. First off, Home Alone 2 should have never happened because the parents should have been in prison.
Well,
for child abandonment. Child neglect.
Right.
I mean, how idiotic could you be and end up in Paris without your kid from Home Alone 1 and then make the second mistake again?
Right.
And
leave him in a Trump hotel.
Right, leave him
in
a Trump hotel to begin with.
Right.
Now, if looking back, that's even
there's
more
the other thing, and the would-be president had a cameo. Where's the bathroom? And he points to it, and then that's it. That's the whole idea. It's like the Taken movies with Liam Neeson. Dude, you don't have a particular set of skills because you guys made 3 movies. You're not good at protecting anyone. They keep getting taken.
Did you see the meme out there where he's talking on the phone? Mm-hmm. I will find you and I will kill you.
Yes.
And the other end of it, it's Chuck Norris goes, "Say what?" He goes, "Oh, never mind, wrong number."
Never mind, wrong number. Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, you make the one movie, you can't make a second one.
Right.
No.
You're actually not anyway.
No, you don't have any skills. You have none.
So when you think about it, really all the John Hughes movies, I mean, I can find something that's politically incorrect with all of them.
Well, seriously. Okay. So we had the thing with, Friends. There were young people that were going back and watching Friends, the TV show Friends, on Netflix, and they were binging, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm feeling guilty for loving it so much or whatever, and it's so wrong. It's politically incorrect. Look, we're not talking about going back to the 40s, where, the good little woman is in her place, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. That wasn't that kind of thing, right? It was the 90s.
Why doesn't, because it did at its time in the 80s, why doesn't Married with Children get, because it's not on during the day. It's on at 5:30.
Because of the absurdity of the characters.
Okay. Because it got, it got flack to begin with, but when you look at it, it's quite tame compared
remember,
to today's standards.
There were groups that were, when Fox
the woman
first
from Michigan.
came about. Married with Children and The Simpsons. They wanted them off the air. Yeah. They didn't want Bart Simpson talking back to Homer. I think we all know why. It wasn't. Think about that. And how tame it is. And it's been on the air now for 50 years? It's tame. But my question, so we talk about the Friends or any old TV shows. I watched another episode of King of Queens. It was on, I don't know who's rerunning it, but I watched it and I thought, you can't write that script today. You couldn't put that in the script today. Now the old movie festivals, right? Mm-hmm. If Humphrey Bogart grabs her and forcibly kisses her, because that's what it looks like. Back then, that was romantic. Not today. My wife and I were actually watching the Hallmark Channel. And
that's okay.
It was an ex-boyfriend had come in during this Christmas dinner thing, and he grabs his ex-girlfriend, who's now kind of on her way to, being with the new boyfriend who's in the room. Well, the ex-boyfriend grabs her and pulls her close. I told my wife, I said, no. That's forcibly kissing. That's wrong. You couldn't do that today. Because this was one of the older movies that they were showing.
Which could be just 5 years old.
Right. It could be 5 or 10 years old. Yeah. It's changing every day. Because this is the whole thing. It's all of we're losing, again, if there's real victimization, this is not to demean any of that. but we're losing our sense of reality when we go out every day and search and cannot stop until we find something to be offended by, to the point that the star of a movie that's been around for over 3 decades still doesn't get the whole point of the movie and the characters that were portrayed in that movie out of anybody. This isn't a 20-year-old saying, I just watched Breakfast Club and I'm offended. It's the star of the movie.
Right.
That's when it becomes stupid.
Yeah. Because it was, as she wrote it in the New Yorker, that he still wins the girl at the end, but your whole concept of why...
I never saw it that way. She changed him.
Yeah.
He didn't win anything. He had to change for them to get together.
He had to open up and show his real self.
He had to change, right.
And there's a difference when we talk about 16, 17-year-olds and the defense mechanisms they use and how they discover to, peel each layer of that off eventually, hopefully when they to become a well-rounded adult. That's really what it was about. But the fact that she didn't get it, and the fact that, like I said, I got just such a kick out of it that John Nolte felt, I got to set Molly Ringwald straight on this.
Well, because it's just becoming stupid at the things that we're offended by.
I know.
More and more.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up, we'll tell you about more people being offended. Coming up. You'll want to hear this story coming up because...
we just don't have enough things to be offended by. That's the problem.
Really, because you hear this and you say, but wait a minute, and we'll have that coming up here. Also, it looks like the president is moving closer to wanting to rejoin the TPP.
Oh, yeah?
The Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Oh, okay.
And people are wondering why. I saw yesterday. It's a reversal of what he's... And I sat there and I just went, I have a feeling I think I know why. A former anchor from CNBC. To me, that's Larry Kudlow.
Yeah.
All the way.
Yeah.
Saying, look, you got China who's not following the rules and regulations. So trade with the people who are following the rules and regulations. Don't alienate them.
Right. And then get them together with you to put the pressure on China if you want change in that direction.
Right.
Which is exactly what Larry Kudlow was talking about on one of his last days.
I could be wrong, but I would say probably I'm 95 to 99% sure.
Sure. Yeah.
That 1% could get me in trouble as it did Trump with Comey. But I have a feeling that Larry Kudlow is behind it.
And Larry Kudlow would also be one that, the president putting the message out that we need a better bilateral deal, across the board. And that's something right